Greetings, friends of the great Advent movement, and welcome to the Present Truth Studies YouTube channel. I'm your host, Brother Eric. Welcome. Today we're going to have a very important discussion, so please pay attention. We're going to help define what constitutes God's church on earth today. Before we go there, though, we would like to thank all the new subscribers. The channel's been growing. A lot of interest, a lot of comments. So in reviewing the comments, there are certain things that are coming up that need clarification. So one of them is the discussion about what it is that is God's church today. So we're going to shed some light on that. Also, just another brief comment. We do see people bringing up this idea of, well, we shouldn't be talking about troubles in the church. Take it to the leaders, Matthew 18. And I'm like, friends, Matthew 18 is for personal matters or private matters. But when you go to YouTube and go to the media, open media, with your position statement, then that's public. And so we have every right to comment on it and talk about what's being taught. So please don't make that justification. Another channel also brought this up and give a right perspective. When you go public, then you open yourself up for scrutiny. And furthermore, if you have a problem with calling sin by its right name, that's in the Bible. Jesus, John the Baptist, and many, many others had called out the sins of the leaders. So we shouldn't shy away from that. But we should rightly divide private matters versus public ones. And the issues of the church leadership today and what they're doing are certainly public. So just as a point of clarification. Now, join me as we go in and look at this topic about what constitutes God's church on earth today. There's a lot of division. There's not a consensus. One people want to define it this way or another. People will look at the problems in the General Conference and their apostasies and try to distance themselves from that organizational structure. However, that's why we need to clarify what it is as God's church and what we should be doing as part of it. So please join me as we go into a brief PowerPoint here. And so our thumbnail, we ask the question, how do we define the church? There are some that will argue that it's the believers that keep the commandments of God. To some extent, that's true. But what about others will argue, well, it has to be the church organization manifested in the General Conference. So which one is it? And why is there so much confusion? So our purpose today is to help give us a perspective to understand how we should relate to the church leadership in the General Conference as a body of faithful believers, and then what it is that God's going to do in the end to save his church from its indecent worldly associations. So here's the key question. What constitutes God's church on earth today? Church leaders, for example, Elder Mark Finley in his recent response to separating from the church, will want you to believe that it's the organized corporate Seventh-day Adventist church. Is he right? Is he wrong? Others argue that it's the faithful believers within the church. And some will argue that we should separate from the corrupted Seventh-day Adventist church and form home churches. So you will see this discussed on YouTube channels and Facebook and so forth. But the question is, which one is it? So that's why we want today is to answer that and offer clarity how to balance statements from inspiration. We'll start with this prayer thought. It comes from Testimonies to the Church, Volume 5, page 473, and it reads, Zechariah's vision of Joshua, this is Zechariah chapter 3, and the angel applies with peculiar force to the experience of God's people in the closing up of the great Day of Atonement. The remnant church will be brought into great trial and distress Those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus will feel the ire of the dragon and his hosts. Satan numbers the world as his subjects. He has gained control of the apostate churches, but here is a little company that are resisting his supremacy. If he could blot them from the earth, his triumph would be complete. As he influenced the heathen nations to destroy Israel, so in the near future he will stir up the wicked powers of the earth to destroy the people of God. So notice this concept of the remnant church, okay, that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. That's a direct reference to one of the identifying marks of the remnant church in Revelation chapter 12, verse 17. So they're going to undergo trouble. Satan hates them, and he's going to cause all kinds of trouble for them. And it's clear here also that Satan is in control of the apostate churches. That represents the fallen churches constituting Babylon. And that's an important term. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, I'll repeat here, once again, is not and never will be Babylon. There are people that come to that conclusion, but they're dead wrong. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is identified as Laodicea, and we'll get more into that here in a moment. So this idea of the remnant church is important. And the argument, well, is there a remnant within a remnant? Well, there are certain, the church leaders don't want you to believe that. Mark Finley made that clear. Oh, there's no remnant within the remnant. But that's not true. There is going to be a remnant from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We'll see that here in a moment. So what or who is the remnant? And this question was asked on a very popular Facebook group called Seventh-day Adventist Religious Issues. This is a public group. It's got over 834,000 members. So this is probably one of the largest social media groups of Adventists anywhere. And this question was posed: is the General Conference the remnant church of God? Next question: what constitutes the true remnant church of God? Great questions. But what's the answer? And this is where we notice that there's a division. There's not a consensus. So we're going to answer those questions, but first let's look at some of the comments under this post. It seems that people have selective vision. So a certain statement comes in. At the top, it says, the statement written by Ellen White quoted in this group in the intro reveals the truth that no denomination of God's church. Really? His church is a people who love God and keep his commandments, not the man-made and human-controlled organization, hint, hint, the General Conference. Therefore, the organization can and will collapse someday, and God's church will remain organized only by God. So that's a comment from a certain Reuben. And then another brother comes in, yeah, that's true. Then another brother comes in, well, read Revelation 12, verse 17, and chapter 14, verse 12, talking about the identifying marks of the remnant church, those who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. Clear, direct reference to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Some people like that, but then somebody else comes in, oh, no, absolutely not. God's church will always be the people who are true to his word and obey his commandments. The GC is far from it. So you see here, there's a sentiment that wants to separate from the General Conference. And you look at that group, the admins of that group, they're of that type. They will promote a website that's arguing that the conference is so far in apostasy that we have to, form home churches or whatever. Is this correct? Are they overlooking something? How do we understand what the church is today and what's it going to be in the future? So that's why we have to clarify. There's some parts missing. People want to grab a statement and build a mountain out of it rather than look at the whole picture. So what's one definition of God's church? This is in that Facebook group. This is the one in their introduction. This is the statement, and a lot of Adventists will go to this when they get discouraged with the church leadership and argue for a home church. And here's the statement. It's from a compilation called The Upward Look. daily devotional, page 315, paragraph 5. It says, God as a church, it's not the great cathedral, neither is it the national establishment, neither is it the various denominations. It is the people who love God and keep his commandments. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. Matthew 18, verse 20. Where Christ is, even among the humble few, this is Christ's church. For the presence of the high and holy one, who inhabiteth eternity, can alone constitute a church. Now, people will grab onto this as an argument to perhaps redirect their tithe to faithful ministries that they think that are upholding the commandments of God or faithful to the message, and separate from the organized body. Now, this is much to the chagrin of church leaders, and you can see that reflected in Mark Finley's recent video responding to the Conrad Vine situation about suggesting maybe in the future there'll be a para-church movement. The conference doesn't like that. What is it? Well, let's look at the statement in context. It actually, since it's a devotional, it's originally from a letter 108, published October 28, 1886. And here's a key note. It's a letter, personal letter from Ellen White to her older sister and husband, brother-in-law, who had not accepted the Sabbath truth. So this is a personal appeal on a council. Is this an argument that we're to separate from the organized church body? Be careful. We have to go by weight of evidence and balance other statements and try to harmonize with all that's written. So back to the question, is the General Conference the remnant church of God? The answer to the first question is no. They're not the remnant. They're part of the remnant, but they are not the remnant church of God. And second question, what constitutes the true remnant church of God? This is the answer that most people are not clarifying. It will be the 144,000, a purified remnant that will come from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is not an answer that you will hear from Mark Finley or church leaders, and you won't even hear it from other Adventists. They're really not defining what is this remnant within the remnant. Will there be faithful Adventists within the church? Absolutely. But right now they're disclosed from view. It's hard to identify them, but in time, God will bring them forth. They will be manifest. So that's why we want to bring this up. Where are they? How are they going to be brought forth? Well, here's a part you have to harmonize, is that Laodicea is the seventh church in Revelation. You can't escape it. This is a historical, in Revelation chapters 2 and 3, you've got these 7 churches in the New Testament era, and the 7th of which is Laodicea, over there under that red arrow. And by definition, that term, a compound Greek word comprised of Lao and Dicea, literally means a people declaring judgment. That's an identifying mark. There's only one church in the entire world that has that characteristic. It's the Seventh-day Adventist Church, declaring, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. That's Revelation. That's the first angel's message in Revelation 14. So a church declaring the 3 angels' message. That's unmistakable evidence. Okay, so we have to harmonize that with that other reference in the compilation Upward Look. So is it possible within Laodicea that God has faithful people that are striving to live up to all the truth? And the answer is yes, there is. So you can't divorce yourself from the organizational structure or what constitutes Laodicea, the organized Seventh-day Adventist Church. And the way to understand that is to understand the concept between church militant and church triumphant. They're not the same thing. So let's look at this statement. And there are many. You can search the writings of Ellen White for church militant and church triumphant, and there's dozens of references. We're just going to pick out 2 that are particularly illustrative. Here's one, Testimonies to Ministers, page 61, paragraph 2. It reads, God has a church upon the earth who are his chosen people, who keep his commandments. He is leading, not stray offshoots, not one here and one there, but a people. The truth is a sanctifying power, but the church militant is not the church triumphant. There are tares among the wheat. Wilt thou then that we gather them up? Was the question of the servant, but the master answered, Nay, lest ye gather up the tares, ye also root up the wheat with them. The gospel net draws not only good fish, but bad ones as well, and the Lord only knows who are his. So there's the church militant. That's the church we're in today. It's a mixture of wheat and tares. And yes, it has all kinds of troubles, and worldliness, and backsliding, and apostasies. We should expect it. But also, this term church triumphant, that hasn't come yet. And that is the key. There's got to be a transition from militant to triumphant. And you look at the statement from a letter written in 1892, you find it in the Book of Evangelism, page 707, paragraph 1. It says, the work will soon close. The members of the church militant who have proved faithful will become the church triumphant. Notice the tense of that structure of that sentence. It doesn't say that members of the church militant will separate. No. They're the ones that remain faithful. They become the church triumphant. So on the basis of this, there's no argument to separate from church militant, the organized Seventh-day Adventist church today, despite its worldliness and turning its back on Christ as their leader and steadily retreating towards Egypt. No, we need to remain faithful within the church. And if so, we will become church triumphant. So that's the key. There has to be a transition from militant to triumphant. And that's the part that people aren't really focusing in on. So here's the answer. It's present truth. That's why we need it's present truth the flock needs now. Early Writings, page 63. So if we look at Daniel 2 in connection with Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 to 8, we can get a strong clue. Now this is where Seventh-day Adventists get in all kinds of trouble. In Daniel 2, you see a stone. Most Adventists are brainwashed to believe that that stone is Christ at the second coming. It is not. Now, if you doubt me, we have a link in the description box below to go into a video that exposes the fraud of changing the doctrine about the identity of the stone. But if you look at Scripture, now we have a video to break this down in detail, but I'll just point out the highlights here. That stone doesn't come from heaven, it comes from a mountain which is on earth at the time of the 10 toes. So the question becomes, what does the mountain represent in Scripture? Well, the Bible interprets itself. You can look these up, Isaiah 56, verse 7, Daniel chapter 9, verses 16 and 20. A mountain represents God's people on earth, his church. And at times of the 10 toes, there's only one church on earth that God recognizes as his own, defective as it is. That's Laodicea, the Seventh-day Adventist church. So we have a stone being separated out of that mountain. And the Bible says it's without hands. That's an act of divine judgment. God does the separating between wheat and tares. So that stone is a purified remnant from the Seventh-day Adventist church. And guess who that is? It's 144,000. And they're the ones, they smite the image, they're the ones that preach the loud cry. You can correlate this in Revelation 7. Okay, you have the angels holding the four winds until what? The servants of God are sealed in their forehead. The first fruits. That's 144,000. Once they're sealed, then the four winds let loose. And then they go out, a purification event. Their seal is not the Sabbath. It's those that sigh and cry for the abominations done in the midst. That's in Ezekiel chapter 9. Did you know that? Look it up. Ellen White makes a connection in Testimonies to Ministers, page 445, that John and Ezekiel saw this same thing. So those first fruits are the ones that will go out and give the loud cry, and they'll gather in a great multitude that no man can number, from Revelation 7, verse 9. They constitute the fallen churches of the world, Babylon, if you will. The call to come out of Babylon, come out of Roman people. When the loud cry was, the three angels' message was repeated with power and force. Did you know that? So this is present truth. If you're not familiar with these, please check the link in the description box below for videos going through this in a step-by-step systematic way. Also, at the end of the video, we have a contact. You can email us or message us, and we'll send you literature, the track literature, to go through the details. But this is the answer. This is a transition from church militant to church triumphant. The church triumphant is going to be the 144,000. Here's another present true study, the book of Zechariah, chapter 6, the horses and chariots. Adventist commentaries had nothing to say about this. Why is it in the Bible? Well, the answer is it's to be revealed at the end of time to show us the history of God's church from Pentecost to Pentecost, the horses and chariots representing different portions of the church in the period of the falling away. And out of that, this fourth chariot, this is the paradox. The horses and chariots is the church, leaders and laity. And this shows two sets of horses. One going to the south country, the grizzled mixture of black and white, hypocritical leadership, and the bay horses that stand strong for the truth, trying to take the church to and fro the earth to give the loud cry. So you have this split, two different sets of leadership within Laodicea. God has to step in and carry out a separation. So this is an exact description of the conditions of the Adventist church today. And then furthermore, what God intends to do to remedy the situation. He has to step in and separate. Angels of God will do this work. It's not a man-made operation. This is an act of God. And God is pleading with the church to what he's going to do to save it from its indecent worldly associations. We need to know these things. So right there at that red arrow, that's what's going to separate them. And that is the purification event, Ezekiel 9. So what can we learn from this brief summary to awaken your minds that would otherwise sleep in slumber, to agitate that God is pleading with the church? There is a present truth to save the church from its indecent worldly associations. So there are many ideas out there what constitutes God's true church on earth today. We need to correct our thinking if we're going to understand how God is leading his people today and what he's going to do in the near future. Whether believed or not, we're all under the umbrella of Laodicea, which includes the organizational structure under the General Conference. Wheat and tares will dwell together until the harvest. So for those folks that are discouraged, disgusted, whatever, with the church leadership, there's no call to abandon. We have to remain faithful and true and stand for the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus and be the faithful remnant within the remnant. So there's no call to separate from the organizational structure, despite the opposition you may receive. We're now, in the way we understand it, is we're now in the church militant phase. I mean, it's active warfare in the midst. Wheat and tares mixed, every wind of doctrine blowing. But the thing we should be looking for is the divine remedy for this. But soon coming is the church triumphant, which will arise after purification and will be comprised of the 144,000 first fruits of the harvest. They're only the first fruits. They will gather the great multitude of Revelation 7:9, no man can number, during the loud cry. Church triumphant will be pure wheat, no tares in the midst. So friends, that's the remedy of the situation in the church today. So God's going to remove the unfaithful. It's inevitable. But the faithful who are remaining will be the ones that God will use to proclaim the loud cry. So that's good news. God has not forsaken his church. We have to do our part to understand these things and put into practice all the light that's been given to us. So we thank you for your time. We hope that you have been aroused from your slumber, and we'll investigate these things further. So for more information, if you have any further questions, comments, or would like to request an outline of the study as a PDF, or obtain print copies of original tract literature based on those charts in Zechariah 6, Daniel 2, and so forth, gives some more complete details. Arrange for a formal Bible study at your convenience. We can do that through WhatsApp call, Zoom call. Then feel free to contact us anytime. Here's our email. This phone number, you can call, text, or connect with us on WhatsApp, or visit our website, shepherds-rod-speaks.org. So friends, let us not despise prophesying, prove all things, and hold fast to that which is good. And furthermore, study show ourselves as a workman needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, and to cease from all men whose breath are in their nostrils. Until we meet again, Godspeed.